Hello! So this is going to be a tutorial on Superswimming in Wind Waker, on the GameCube version specifically. So in this game we have two different methods of Superswimming. The first one is called manual Superswim, and this is the one which is normally done at the very beginning of a speedrun to swim from outset all the way to Dragon Roost. And that is done by pause buffering in the water about 200 times, or by doing it unbuffered, which is done by flicking the control stick up and down. So the way that works is that when you're in the water and you turn around, the game will give you some negative speed for one frame. So the idea is that if you keep turning around every other frame, or every frame, you just keep building negative speed, like this. And then after you've done enough pauses, you have enough speed. You see I was moving backwards a little bit there. Obviously that was not enough speed to Superswim, but you would keep doing that to gain more speed. The other Superswim is a camera lock Superswim, and that's the Superswim that we do throughout the entire rest of the run, pretty much in any speed run. And that is actually the exact same idea, is that you're turning around every frame, except we use a glitch called camera lock to essentially automatically turn around every frame, instead of having to manually pause buffer every single turnaround. So that's done with a glitch using camera lock, which is done like this. First you do a glitch called storage, which is what I'm doing right now. And then once you have storage, and you pull the Wind Waker, you enter this state called camera lock. And basically, it lets you do this, which is turning around in the water every single frame, and that is how you build up speed. So if you want a tutorial on manual Superswim, there's going to be a video in the description by EJ about that, but this is going to be about the camera lock Superswim. So the first step to doing a Superswim is to get storage, which you can then use to activate camera lock. Now in the description there's going to be two videos by Trog, which go in depth on storage, ways to get storage, a bunch of different uses of storage. So I absolutely would recommend to check out both of those videos to gain an understanding on storage. But essentially the way you do storage, well, the most common method for doing storage is called dry storage, and to do that you need to first make sure you have the Wind Waker in Link's hand. You can't really see it here, but see it's in his hand when he's running. And then you climb a ledge such that when you are on top of the ledge there is something directly in front of Link which will cause the camera to turn around when you pull the Wind Waker like this. And then what you do is you climb the ledge, you pull the Wind Waker to get a Wind Waker dive like that, and then you want to cancel the Wind Waker by pressing B 3 frames before you hit the ground. So it is a frame perfect trick, like that. And you end up in this state where you're playing the Wind Waker, but you can freely move the camera around like this. And then you just press B to cancel again, and now you have storage. So once you have storage, all you have to do from here is to pull out the Wind Waker again, and that puts you in camera lock, just like this. And you can try running around the camera lock, and you'll probably notice pretty quickly that the controls are not super intuitive. So I will explain how that works. So let me just get storage again. Alright, so I'm going to activate camera lock with the camera facing this direction. So the rock, this rock here, is behind the camera. Well, not behind the camera, it's in front of the camera. So I'm going to activate camera lock. And now if I press up on the stick, I'm going to walk towards the rock. Down is away from the rock. Left, as you expect. So right now it seems pretty normal. I can move the direction that I press my control stick. Now I'm going to turn Link this way. And if I press up on the control stick, you see I still move in the direction towards that rock. Down is still away from it. So the control stick directions are still the same as they were before, even though I've changed the camera. So essentially when you activate camera lock, your controls are locked in the direction that they were in when you activated camera lock. So whatever direction your camera was facing when you activated the glitch, your controls will always be like that. Now the exception to this is when you are in water. When you're in water, the controls are actually always relevant to the camera. So you see I'm swimming in the same direction my camera's or my stick is going. If I turn around it's still the same. Up is away from the camera, down is towards the camera. And this is actually why it works, because, or why gaining speed in a Superswim works, because what you're doing is, let me just get an air refill, is when you hold up, Link tries to do a 180-degree turn. So he turns around, but then in that same frame, the camera also follows him because it's locked in front of him. But then holding up corresponds to turning around the other way, so you just keep holding up, and it just makes you turn around over and over again. So like I said, when you're on land, your controls are based off of what the camera was when you activated the glitch, but when you're in water, they're based off of the actual current camera angle. However, there is actually a slight exception, is that when you're on land, but close to the water, it actually also is the same as in water. So like here, you can see I'm still clearly standing, I'm not swimming, but my controls are actually relevant to the current camera angle, rather than what it was when I activated the glitch. So you see right now I need to hold right to walk towards the water, so I'm holding right, but then as I get close to the water, this happens. And that's because the game is constantly switching between, I have to hold right to walk towards the water, like this, but then once I'm close to the water, clearly I need to hold left, because that's what the camera wants. So it's a bit weird when you're trying to like walk into water, you have to kind of, depending on how you activated the glitch, you might have to switch your camera or your direction like partway through. So it's just something to get used to, something to be aware of. Now, the other thing that you want to be aware of with camera lock is when you pull the Wind Waker just normally, there are two different possible camera angles you can get. So you see how obviously Link is in front of the camera here, but you see how the camera is either slightly left or slightly right. So right now, this camera angle, the camera is slightly left of Link, but now it's in the other state where it's slightly to the right of Link. So you see how there's kind of two different camera angles, and as far as I'm aware, it's just completely random which one the game chooses. So this is going to be relevant to Superswimming and when you're building speed, so just keep this in mind. Okay, so let's go over building speed in camera lock. So once you've got camera lock and you're in the water, like I said, you want to hold up on the control stick to make Link turn 180 degrees every frame. But you see that if I just hold straight up, then Link kind of spins in a circle like this, and that's not what you want. And that is because of the two different facing angles, or camera angles, that I showed you. So you see when I'm in the water here, see how the camera is? It's kind of in front and slightly to the right of Link, so Link looks like he's facing a bit to the left. Now that means that if I want to get a full 180 degree turn, I have to hold up, but also slightly to the right. You see now, I'm not spinning around as much, and I can control my angle by just holding the control stick slightly more left or slightly more right. You see how I can kind of control where I'm facing, going left and right. So that is how you control your angle while building speed. And in order to build as much speed as you can, you want to try and stay as close to 180 degree turns as possible, because the more you deviate from that and the more you move around, the less speed you're going to build overall. So you want to practice just finding that stick angle. And because of the two different camera angles, like I showed, there's going to be two different possible angles you want to hold. So with this camera angle I have, I want to hold up and to the right, but you can also have that you want to hold up and to the left if you happen to get the other camera angle. So the other thing you want to be aware of when building speed is what we call oscillations. So if I just get in the water and start building some speed, now you see that Link is obviously turning back and forth, and as he builds more speed, he's going to turn back and forth more distance each turn. But you see on the minimap in the bottom left, he's generally in the same place. But then you see just then how he moved a bit. So that is what we call an oscillation, and essentially at certain speeds, because of Link's animation, he's going to move around a bit in the water. So because of that, you want to make sure that at those speeds, and preferably just all of the time when you're charging speed, unless you're like specifically going for an air refill or something, you want to try and have your angles so that in both directions you're facing, there is water on either side. Because if I charge with an angle like this, for example, you see how I'm facing the land, then I might end up just oscillating towards the land, and that will just instantly give me a sploosh and I'll lose all of my speed. Like that. So you want to try and have an angle like this, where you see in both directions there's water either side, so when I do oscillate, I'm going to end up in water either way. So once you've built up some speed by charging in camera lock, the next thing to do is to release the swim and actually use that speed to do a super swim and get some distance. So there are a few things that are important to note about this. So one thing that I want to mention is that when you're pausing the game, there is kind of a 1 frame visual delay. So essentially what you're seeing on the screen is delayed by 1 frame. So like if I'm in the water, so I'm facing away from the camera, the speedle. So if I go down, I'm going to turn around instantly. But you see, if I pause buffer 1 frame down, you see Link didn't actually turn. But when I unpause, I'm not going to press anything. Now he turns around. So he actually did turn around on the frame that I paused, but you just didn't see it visually until the next frame. So that's something to keep in mind for when you're buffering swims to know which direction you want to go. And the other thing that's important to remember is that when you're super swimming, it's always negative speed, which means you're always swimming backwards. So if you're using the map screen to see what direction you want to go, you always have to remember that you're going to be swimming backwards. And the 1 frame delay doesn't apply to the map screen either. So if you're using the map screen to see what direction you want to go, this is actually the direction you're going to be facing when you go off the map screen. But you also have to remember you're going to be going backwards. So say I wanted to travel to Windfall from here, I would want to buffer until I'm facing away from Windfall so that I travel backwards to it. Okay, so let's do an example of releasing a super swim. So I'm going to jump into the water and start building some speed. Now, so the first way to release a swim is by pause buffering. So let's say I want to travel in the direction of Tower of the Gods. You can see it in the background there. So I'm going to pause buffer. I need to, because of the 1 frame visual delay and because I'm traveling backwards, I need to pause buffer to the frame where I do not see Tower of the Gods. So right now on this frame I can see it. I can still see it. There you go. Now I'm on a frame where I can't see it. So on this frame that I paused on, it looks like I was facing towards Tower of the Gods. But because of the 1 frame delay, I'm actually going to be facing away from Tower of the Gods when I unpause. And because Link is traveling backwards, that's what I want. So if I unpause and just don't press anything, you see I'm traveling in the direction of Tower of the Gods. Now, pause buffering a super swim, or releasing a super swim, is nice if you can see your destination as you're charging the swim. But that's not always the case, and sometimes it's better to use the map screen, because you can actually see what direction you're going. So let me just build some speed here and I'll show you. Alright, so let's say we wanted to go towards Tower of the Gods again. So what I want to do is pause buffer on my map until I get a frame like this. So you see Link's facing triangle, the little yellow triangle there. So it looks like I'm facing north and slightly east. So that means that when I travel backwards, I'm going to be going this direction, towards Tower of the Gods. And if we release it, again, it's going towards Tower of the Gods. So knowing your angle when you release a swim is great, but what if you need to change your angle during the swim? Because it's pretty unlikely that you're going to release a swim at the perfect angle and not have to change throughout the entire swim. So if you just get camera lock and go into water, something that you want to note is that if I hold left on my stick, see Link is going to swim to the left. And if I hold right, then he's going to swim to the right like that in a kind of circle. And that is basically how you're going to turn while super swimming, because exactly the same is going to happen when you're at high speeds. So if I just charge some speed here and I release a swim, see if I press right I'm going to turn left. And similarly, if I want to swim back to Dragon Roost, you see it's a bit to the right, I just need to press left and I'll change my direction. So you just have to press left and right, and that is how you do it. I'll just show some more turning here. See on the map how I'm just moving around like this. And if you saw my input display there, I was actually pressing sort of down left and down right. So basically anything left or right will work. If I just get camera lock again, you'll see that you don't have to like press fully left or fully right or anything. pretty much any direction will give you the same result. So if I press just like, if I'm only pressing ESS, or if I press full, like it gives the same result basically. And by the way, ESS means, so when my control stick is in the middle, like here, when I'm not pressing anything, we call that neutral. And then basically barely outside of neutral, that's what we call ESS. So releasing a swim in neutral is kind of the most intuitive way to release a swim, but generally it's actually not the preferred way. There is another way of releasing a swim that we call ESS swimming. And the reason that neutral swimming is not preferred is that when you release the swim, your exact speed that you get depends on Link's animation frame, which can be quite hard to predict. There are ways to get consistent speeds, but you have to do some pause buffering and look at Link's animation, and it's just more difficult than ESS swimming. So sometimes you'll just release a swim and you'll just have way less speed than otherwise, so it's a bit inconsistent. And another reason that neutral swimming is bad is that if we just look at Link swimming in the water, see there are kind of two different animations. So there's this idle animation when my control stick is in neutral, and then there's the swimming animation if I have ESS or full, pressing fully on the stick. And the properties of these two animations are basically that the idle animation, which is when your stick is in neutral, this, when super swimming, can give you a greater speed, but it also loses speed a lot faster than if you were to do a super swim holding ESS like this. And also, as you saw, is that when you're doing a neutral super swim, the way that you change direction is by turning like this. And so what that means is that you're switching between the idle animation and the ESS animation. And switching between the animations specifically will lose you speed a lot faster than if you just stayed in one animation the whole time. So that means that every time you want to change direction during a neutral swim, you risk losing a lot of speed, on top of the fact that neutral swimming is just less consistent with the speed in general. So that's why there is another method of swimming called ESS swimming, which I'll show you now. So ESS swimming is based off of swimming while targeting. So you see, if I'm targeting and I'm swimming, then I can swim around just like normal, but Link's facing angle doesn't change. So when you're ESS swimming, you're basically going to be swimming like this. You're going to be targeting and holding ESS down, so towards the camera, to swim in this animation here. So building speed is going to be exactly the same as before. That's going to be the same for either version of super swimming. But once you've built the swim, or built enough speed to release the swim, the inputs are going to be like this. So you're going to want to hold ESS down like I just showed, and L to target, and it's going to look like this. So this version of super swimming is going to retain speed a lot better, but it's not going to be quite as fast, or potentially not as fast as neutral super swimming. So that's the inputs for doing a basic ESS super swim. So I've built up some speed again, and I'm going to release another swim. But I'm going to talk about strafing in the water. So as I said, ESS super swimming is based off targeting, and like I showed, you can't actually change your facing angle while targeting. So I'm going to just release the swim holding L and ESS down. Now I'm going to show you what happens if I hold ESS down and slightly to the right. It might be hard to see, but you see I'm strafing to the left. Now if I hold down and slightly to the left, I start strafing to the right, but my facing angle is actually the same. So this is something you can do in ESS swims that you can't do in neutral swims, is that you can kind of move left and right, but without actually changing your angle. Now, strafing is good, but sometimes you're going to want to change your facing angle anyway. And you can do that, but it's a little more complicated. So I'm going to just start this ESS swim again, like this. And now, say I want to turn to the left. So as I showed, if I hold down an ESS right, then that's going to make me strafe to the left. Now if I want to change my facing angle, so I'm facing more left, what I have to do is hold ESS right and let go of target. Now this is basically the same as how you turn in a neutral swim, so that you hold left or right. But I want to make sure that I'm holding ESS the whole time, so I hold ESS down and right. So this is turning left right now, and then when I want to stop turning left, then I just go back to holding L and ESS down. So there I was pause buffering it, but here I'll show you it without buffering, so I do like this. And you have to just kind of get used to how long you have to let go of target for how much of a turn you want to get. But that's how you do it. So it's kind of a mixture of strafing and then letting go of target to turn for the duration that you want to turn for. Okay, so now let's talk about how you want to end your super swim. So once you reach your destination island, then you're probably going to want to kill your speed once you get there. So let me just charge a bit of speed so I can show you. So let's say I'm swimming towards Dragon Roost. So now I'm in the direction where I'll be swimming there. So there are a few ways you can kill your speed on land. The first one is to pull the Wind Waker, like this. And that also gets rid of camera lock. But you see how far I moved up onto the island before I actually ended up pulling Wind Waker? Because I was stood around here, which is quite far from the water. And the reason for that is that when you don't already have the Wind Waker in your hand, it takes a few frames to actually pull the Wind Waker out. Whereas if it's in your hand already, it just pulls out instantly when you press the button. So when you're landing from a super swim, obviously you don't have the Wind Waker in your hand while you're swimming. So it actually takes a few frames. So you can end up being quite far from the shore, which sometimes might not be an issue at all, but sometimes if you're landing on like smaller platforms, like say you're landing at a submarine or something, then it might be quite problematic having to wait such a long distance before you actually stop. So another way you could kill your speed is by rolling. So right now I'm heading towards Dragon Roost, and if I just hold L and just mash A, you see I do a roll. That also kills my speed. It doesn't take me out of camera lock, so I am going to have to pull Wind Waker anyway, but you see I landed a lot closer to the water, and that's because rolling just happens instantly. I didn't have to wait those couple frames to pull out the Wind Waker like I did before. So either of those can be fine ways to stop. So pulling Wind Waker or rolling are great if your super swim is landing onto like a slope that goes into the water, but sometimes you're going to want to land at places like this where you have to actually climb up onto the land. So like for example Forest Haven or the docks at Windfall, just as a couple examples. So in these situations it's going to be good to know how to kill your speed in the water. So if I just build up some speed as if I'm super swimming here. So let's say I just reached here and now I need to kill my speed. So killing your speed is actually very easy. All you have to do is hold target and hold up on the control stick, and that just kills my speed instantly. And then once your speed is killed, you can just kind of maneuver around like this and climb up like that, and then you can cancel your camera lock and you've climbed up. And killing your speed in the water can be good in other situations as well, but this is just one place where it's particularly useful. So if you have to climb up, because climbing up with a lot of speed is quite tricky. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with regards to stopping a super swim, it's something that's maybe more of an advanced topic, but it's something that's good to know anyway, which is called neutral boosting. And it's to do with how we talked about neutral swimming versus ESS swimming. So when you're super swimming in neutral, then you can potentially have more speed than with ESS, but you'll lose speed faster. So that means that sometimes it can be useful when you're at the end of a super swim or near the end of a super swim to switch from ESS swimming to neutral swimming. And also neutral swimming can feel easier than ESS swimming, like easier to control when you're like trying to go towards the island, and easier to land specifically on an island. So for example, if I were to swim to paw print here, I'll show you what I mean. So I just build up some speed. So I'm here, and then I can go to neutral. Something like that. So sometimes, I mean, paw print is pretty easy to land on because it's very big, but if you're trying to like fine-tune your direction more towards the end of a swim, then sometimes neutral can be a lot easier. And you might not actually gain any speed, but you shouldn't really lose speed. So it can be good to do that at the end of a swim, but it's not really necessary. Now, I think the last thing to talk about before you can do a full super swim is how much speed to charge. Because doing the super swim is very dependent on your air meter, because you only have so much time to build up speed and do the swim. So it's finding a balance between the time you spend building up speed and the time that you spend actually doing the super swim. So generally, a super swim in this game without any air refills can go about 3 quadrants maximum. So if I were to swim from Dragon Roost, I could make it to Windfall pretty easily. I could go to Northern Triangle, that would be a pretty comfortable distance. Anything further than this, so if I wanted to go to Tingle for example, that would be a stretch. You probably could make it from here to Tingle, but you'd have to have a really good super swim. So there are a couple good visual cues you can use to know when to release a super swim. So if you're just doing a normal super swim with no air refills, then you want to charge about half of your air meter, or a little bit over half, to give you the maximum distance. So that's basically when the air meter starts turning red and starts flashing. Another good visual cue are the oscillations. So when I mentioned oscillations before, I mentioned that those happen at certain speeds. So those are actually consistent speeds. And it might be hard to see at first, but you can actually tell from the animation like which oscillation you're at. So let me just start building some speed here. Hopefully Beetle doesn't get in my way. So you can see right now Link's animation is kind of slowing down. So that's the first time his animation was slowing down. I'm actually just gonna move out of the way of Beetle a little bit. Okay, so now his air meter's going, and you also see Link's animation is slowing down a second time. So those are kind of the 2 visual cues. So the air meter going below half, and then also Link's air meter going, oh sorry, and also the second time where Link's animation slows down during the second oscillation. So this would be a good time to release a swim. So let's say I wanted to go to Northern Triangle Island, so I would do my ESS inputs. This is a good direction. Now I can see it, and now I might neutral boost from here. Ooh, went straight past it. Okay, so here I'm gonna just charge some more speed to fix my direction. There you go. So that's also another way you might save a super swim. If you go past the island, then charging speed can be a good way to redirect yourself. During that example super swim I just did, I actually built up a little bit more speed than I normally would, just because I was explaining at the same time and went a bit past my normal visual cues. But as you can see, I still made it to the island perfectly fine. So it's not super precise, but you will need to just try and get used to knowing how much speed you have and when to release a swim. And if you're going for a much shorter swim, say like you're only going 1 quadrant across, then you might want to build up a lot less speed, because it's quite hard to control. As you saw when I was swimming here, when you have a lot of speed, it can be a bit difficult to land on an island, so you might try to go for a bit less speed so you can control it easier if you're going for a shorter swim. The very last thing I want to talk about is air refills and some other useful information. So air refills can let you swim much further distances depending on how much of an air refill you get, or like how long into charging your swim that you get your last air refill, to essentially let you stay in the water longer. So one useful way to get air refills, which you can do on a lot of islands, is a shore refill. So essentially is that that's near the shore, you see my air meter is like kind of popping up and disappearing. So because I'm charging near the shore right now, I'm getting an air refill. And I am charging a surprising amount of speed before I splooshed. So that's the thing with shore refills, is it can be very easy to sploosh. And this is kind of a thing that depends on what island you're on, where you are exactly. Some shores are very, very easy to build speed without splooshing. I mean, it's always very easy to sploosh if you change your angle much or anything. But some shores are just like really difficult to build much speed on before you sploosh. So for example here, this is a decent shore to get an air refill, but it's still quite easy to sploosh. But this one over here, oops, if I can maneuver around in camera lock. Right here, it's pretty easy to build up a lot of speed here and get a bunch of air refills before you sploosh. Okay, well that wasn't a great example. But here, see I'm getting a bunch of air refills and then I can just leave whenever I feel like it. So now, I can just continue charging and release my swim with a lot more speed and go a lot further. And the exact speed will depend on the swim. There isn't really a set amount of speed to build because it depends on how much of an air refill you get. But this can let you swim really far. So I've turned on cheats now, and I'm going to just swim around and show some air refill spots and techniques that are useful to know. So I'm at Windfall because I want to show that here there is a really nice refill spot that is basically anywhere underneath this dock that you swim. You see, you basically get infinite air refill. So like here, here, over here, you just get as much air as you need, which is really nice for swimming from Windfall because this means you can basically swim anywhere from here because you can just continue getting an air refill. So if I just give myself storage, and if you like charge your swim with an angle like this, for example, see, I'm just kind of oscillating back and forth. Ooh, at a bad angle, hit the beach, but yeah, it's pretty easy to just stay under the dock and keep that refill spot. Another really useful refill spot to know are reef refills. So across the map there are 6 reefs. So there's one here right in the middle of the map. There's one here, one here, 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 and here. So these 6 reefs, all 6 of them have a really easy and consistent refill spot. That is basically when you enter the reef, want to go to the corner just kind of opposite where, not opposite, but like that's the entrance to the reef. You want to go to this corner over here, and if you're in this corner and you just kind of super swim into it and kind of turn into the corner like I'm about to show, then there you go, you see my air meter kind of flashed. So that's because I got an air refill. So if you ever are doing a super swim and you need an air refill and you happen to be near a reef, then this is a good place to get an air refill. And it's really easy and consistent. Now another thing that's useful about reefs is that if you're doing a super swim with chest storage, which is not super often, but you are sometimes doing it during a run, then you can basically just rub against the wall of a reef. So I've just given myself chest storage. And now, you see I just swim against this wall, I just instantly get a refill, which is really useful to know. And another place to get a refill with chest storage is on a platform. So, just going to find a platform like here. If I rub against the bottom of this platform, then I get an air refill. So this is just good to know if you have chest storage. There are loads of other places you can get refills with chest storage, like a lot of islands you can kind of just rub against the side. But these are ones that are kind of scattered across the ocean, and are just good to know in general. The very last thing I want to talk about is islands loading. So in this game, islands don't always load immediately. So if you're swimming towards an island with a bunch of speed really fast, then a lot of the time you can kind of just shoot straight through the island because it hasn't loaded yet. So if that happens, then usually you just have to like turn around and redirect yourself so you can land on it. But there are some islands, like the big main islands, where if you swim to that island before it loads, it can cause you to sploosh because it's actually the water around the island is also unloaded. So you just super swim into nothing basically, you start falling, and then when the water loads, you sploosh. So I think those islands are Dragon Roost, Windfall, Great Fish, Fire Mountain, Forest Haven Ice Ring, and Outset. I think those are all of the main sploosh islands. Oh, Forsaken Fortress as well. So just be careful if you're swimming to those islands or like past them in another super swim, because if you get too close to them too fast, then it can cause a sploosh. So I'll swim to Windfall from here and see if I can show you what I mean. And if you want to avoid it, then the water that unloads isn't like the water in the entire quadrant, it's only water like a specific distance from the island. So you can kind of swim in the quadrant but not in the unloaded water and wait for the island to load, or you can just pause buffer until it loads. So there you go. So that's what a sploosh looks like, and it just kills all your speed instantly. So you can pause buffer or kind of swim not directly towards the island, but kind of in the waters around the island and wait for it to load. So that is the end of the tutorial. I hope it was helpful. I tried to go over all of the important parts in quite a bit of detail. And there are definitely some other like more advanced things that are important to know, like double storage super swims and things like balloon air refills. But I hope I went over all of the, you know, the core things that will help you to just be able to do super swims. So yeah, hope it was helpful. Happy super swimming.